Okay. Calling to order the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting of October 18th, 2016. And I think is 50% a quorum?
51%.
51%. So we need one more person before we can pass anything.
Correct.
Okay. But we can still discuss everything on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of September 20th, 2016. Does anybody have any corrections, additions, deletions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do.
Okay, Gary?
Even though I wasn't there, and I probably wouldn't bring this up if somebody else's name was spelled wrong in paragraph 2.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Paragraph 2?
Gary John is all that's in there. And
Ah, thank you.
it seemed like a name is missing too. Like
Yes. Paragraph 2, page 1.
those are the only ones.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Anything else, anybody? Okay, move to pass.
So we couldn't pass anything because we don't have a quorum.
You're right, thank you for that correction. We'll have to wait. Agenda analysis, does anybody want to make any changes, additions, or whatnot to the agenda?
I'm going to add a couple items under the Public Works report, but
Okay, you just play it by ear.
doesn't have to change your agenda.
Okay. The citizens' comments, we don't have any citizens here this evening, so obviously we won't have any of those. New business discussion items. The first one is a bicycle grant by Tom.
Okay, I brought just a fairly basic description of what we've got going here, and it's, I think in the agenda, Lisa may have given me a little more credit on this than it's entirely deserved. It's not specifically my grant, it's the Oregon City Trail Alliance, which is a nonprofit that is focused around trying to enhance active transportation in the Oregon City area, walking and cycling. And we were recently awarded one of the Metro improvement grants for a project to add some more bike racks to Oregon City. We have fewer racks than what cyclists would like to see, and they're not all placed as well as they could be. Some of them are too close to the edge of the sidewalk. So if you park on the curb side, the car that parks next to you can't open the door. Or conversely, they're far enough out where if you're parked on the sidewalk side, you're blocking pedestrian right away.
Oh, yeah.
So our plan is to do a little better job of vetting where and how these are placed, and then with the grant money is for us not only to produce these racks, but also come up with a design that is aesthetically pleasing but still practical. It's something that's not going to raise the ire of the historic neighborhoods. So we've identified a number of locations and partners within the city that are have expressed interest in either working with us to make this happen, or places that have specifically said, yes, we would like to have bike racks. Pioneer Center, Singer Hill, Museum of the Oregon Territory being among those. And the handout I gave you gives a little bit of cycling history for Oregon. Some interesting dates and times in there, but not really relevant to the project if we're trying to get this through. Yeah. And so a couple of our board members are meeting with John and Martin, I believe tomorrow, to go over some of the details on this. Insurance and placement, and making sure we come up with a rack design that, should something happen to one of them, truck back over it or whatever, it will be easily replaceable. We can get something off the shelf where spacing and bolt patterns will match. So we're trying to be careful not to create a one-off thing that.
Are there very many racks down by the transit center? No.
Not many, no, not.
Have you heard of a need for them down there?
Because that's more TriMet's area than ours, we haven't really addressed that. But yeah, I can see where, making that more accessible too, ride your bike to the transit, get into town wherever you need to go, and then have it waiting for you. Yeah, that.
Yeah, I've seen in some of the park and rides where they have those, actually there's a covered bike device,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
but I haven't seen any in Oregon City.
No. Now, the closest thing I've seen in Oregon City is at the train station, and I believe they've got one out here, just
There's
kind of an
two of them
enclosed
right out
sheet
here.
metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Bike boxes.
bike boxes that you
Oh,
can put your own
okay.
padlock on the door.
Yeah.
Any specific questions about the project that I can?
I see
this
that
is
they
great.
have, these two designs are a staple rack with a laser cut insert, or a rack that resembles the arch bridge. Could you, I don't know if those are, if you're able to describe those to us or not.
Okay, the staple is the basic inverted U that you see,
Oh, I see, okay.
and those are really one of the most space and cost effective ways to lock up a bike.
Yeah.
And then we're looking just at insert, 8 to 10 inches tall, going across between the two vertical legs with like a CNC machined, artistry, or possibly just a laser etched plaque, describing historical significance of the location where the rack is at,
Yeah,
or perhaps something, a stylistic, rendition of the arch bridge just to tie into that part of Oregon City.
oh, okay.
When I was traveling around a couple of weeks ago, I saw one in Colorado, I think, which was a wire outline of a bicycle with the two wheels and the connection between.
Yeah,
It, it could be like high wheel and all sorts of different combinations to make them somewhat different.
and there's lots of options. There's lots of artistic designs available. A lot of them, the aesthetics get in the way of the function. So we're trying to keep something that's still functional. And I've seen some places that have put in art racks that look too much like art, and then this local citizenry gets upset when people lock a bike to it.
Yeah, that kind of defeats the function.
Yeah.
It, I guess I would ask why it would take $12,000 to design an artistic and functional bike rack.
Now, the 12,000 includes production and installation
Oh.
as well. That's not just the design.
Okay, because that's not what it says here. It
Yeah.
just says design, so I'm thinking that's an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
I saw a deal
Yeah, that could have
email
been
the other
worded
day
better,
where
yeah.
somebody had locked up their bike on a vertical round post about 4 feet high, and they wrapped their bike lock around
On the
that
post.
post. Yeah, it's the funniest looking thing, because whoever would think about thinking that would be a secure lockup for their bike. That's funny.
Oh, yeah, you can find entire web pages devoted to bike lock fails where people have
Oh,
done
really?
things like that that just
Okay.
no security.
I sat through a technical session at the APWA conference of a the city of Eugene's transportation engineer got a grant to go to Sweden, and he was talking about a lot of traffic related things that they do in Sweden and maybe other European nations, but he was specifically in Sweden, and he said the real estate for places to park bikes that are secured, there's so much biking activity in at least in the metropolitan areas of Sweden that he visited, that anything vertical like a post or bike racks for sure,
Yeah.
but he had some pictures of just courtyards that where people were kind of locking bikes to one another when they knew that. There's bike theft is big there because there's no real good places. There's not enough good places to accommodate all the biking that happens in that country. I thought that was kind of interesting. We don't have that problem, do we?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We
We're
can
working
hope.
on it.
Yeah, I think biking is a lot more prevalent overseas than it is here, for sure.
And we now have a quorum, do
We
we?
have a quorum. Does anybody have any more questions or comments about the bike rack?
I have Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Is Metro funding this 100%?
Okay, I was not involved in the actual grant application. My understanding is this was a Metro enhancement grant
Yeah,
awarded by the city? Or
Right, so it's-
administered by the city?
It's it is Metro dollars that are generated through your. Well, most people they're not called tipping fees, but these would be funds that we get for refuge waste at the Amtrak or Amtrak
The
at
transfer station?
Transfer station, yeah. So there's a I think 50 cents or $1 that per ton that the city receives, and they allocate that through the Metro grant process. So they're Metro dollars, but they have to award them to Oregon City grant projects.
Because of the transfer station.
And then the partnerships and the community partnerships, are they to just provide input to the design and location of the bike racks?
The Oregon City Parks Foundation specifically has expressed interest in just helping to see this happen because they feel that it is at least in parallel with their mission to aid the parks. The other partners listed are places that have specifically expressed an interest in having the racks at their locations.
Okay, thanks.
Isn't the Singer Hill Cafe and the Three Rivers Artist Guild in the same building?
Yeah,
Anybody else?
currently at least. They
Okay, well, now that Sedemir is here, we have a forum, so let's go back a step here and go back to the minutes of September 20th. Did you have any corrections or
No.
to that? Okay, so I would take a motion to pass.
I move that we pass the minutes as amended.
Second?
I second.
Been moved and seconded. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody in opposition? No? Okay, passes unanimously. TAC vacancies and chair and vice chair nominations. That's in a staff report. We have, I have reapplied for the TAC. And Henry, have you reapplied?
I'm good for another period of
Oh,
time.
who was the person then that?
I will be reapplying.
Oh, okay,
I have
good.
not yet turned in my application.
Yeah, you gotta be sure to do that, so. So we will have one opening that I hope we'll be getting some applicants for. There's lots of openings in committees in the city right now. But I don't know how many of them are real true openings where somebody's leaving or has left. That you'd have to almost look at each of their individual rosters to be able to tell that. But, so we'll have two of us that have reapplied and.
Three.
Two of us that have reapplied
Yeah.
with 3 openings.
Steve Johnson was the third, but he resigned over the summer. So we
Okay.
have one true.
So Sedemir, Henry, and Bob.
No.
No.
Bob Sedemir and Steve Johnson were the 3.
Oh, okay. So Henry, you were not. You were still on.
Well, I was up last year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just misread that conversation then.
And the applications have to be in by this Friday?
I thought it's the 25th.
is
That's not Friday.
Tuesday the 25th.
Tuesday the 25th, okay. In a week.
Yes.
So you got your marching orders, buddy. We want to keep you here. Okay, TAC, nominations for chair and vice chair. Are there any nominations for chair?
I'll go ahead and nominate Bob.
Second.
I would accept that nomination.
Pending reappointment.
Well, not only that, but unless somebody else has a strong desire to take the chair, I would be more than willing to cede to that desire. Okay, thank you. Nominations for vice chair. I'll nominate Henry. Can I make a nomination as the chair?
I don't see why not, you're a member.
Well, I'll nominate Henry to stay as the vice chair. We have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have our nominations. We don't vote until November. Is it November?
The bylaw says you nominate in October and then you decide in November.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was November or December, so thank you for that.
I'm glad you reviewed that because I didn't.
Yeah.
And then I guess it's also based on the assumption that Bob's reappointed.
Correct.
Yeah, right, because if I'm not reappointed, I obviously can't be the chair, so you would have to.
I don't see that being a problem, but
Yeah, but I don't think I've tipped off the mayor recently, so I think we'll.
yeah, I don't think he'll have a problem with it.
You still got a month or two.
Well, I mean, we have been getting along just fine since the elections.
That's good.
Okay, that takes care of that. So we now have Public Works report.
So I'll just stay in this order and then add some items after that. The 99E and Main Street Railroad line removal. So many of you, I'm sure, notice some of the problems that we've been having with the crossing there at 99E, just in front of the old Blue Heron office building. So that main crossing, those railroad panels often come loose, and they're basically just bolted down with a long threaded bolt into wooden ties, and so it's been a bit of a challenge to get both ODOT and the railroad to kind of respond to that, and it took some, I would say, direct phone calls from the mayor to ODOT. ODOT, their I'm trying to remember their executive director. I was unfortunate that it went there, but it worked, and all of a sudden we had ODOT and UP folks there quickly to kind of deal with that situation, and they secured the panels that were loose, and as part of that we all kind of agreed we need to talk seriously about removing that spur line as it crosses 99E and goes down Main Street all the way to 6th. There's also a signal system that stops traffic at 6th if there were a car actually pulled out onto that spur, a rail car pulled out onto that spur. So we had an informal meeting with ODOT and Union Pacific, and the ownership of that rail spur is questionable. The Blue Heron Mill needed it for their usage, and so there was an agreement between Blue Heron and UP to pay for that. We actually included it in the reinstallation of that when we had a sewer pipe that was built underneath it and we needed to replace that. So that was done back in 2006. So at this point, it's not a real old railroad spur, but it gets a lot of traffic. And I think all three agencies agreed that we have a collective interest in that. So we're moving forward with the summer of 2017 plan to remove the spur, at least in 99E and on the 6th Street side of Main Street, and then the remainder of that would be up to the owner of the property to deal with in a future time. Evidently, that railroad spur has already, portions of it have already been removed on the Kanema end of the property. So it's really, there's no need for that spur. And we talked a little bit about, well, you know, what if there was some kind of a future streetcar, and that's just the wrong grade of steel as well for spur for that kind of use. So there's really no reason for it to be there. So we're hoping for a joint project whereby UP removes the track and kind of backfills the track, and ODOT and Oregon City work together to get it paved. It's likely going to be in Martin's annual paving project, but we haven't fully worked out the details on that yet. But we all recognize that we have a stake in making that happen. So just thought I'd give you that little update.
Would that include the part of the track from 99E south to the entrance of the mill?
Not to the entrance of the mill.
Okay.
It'll be, we basically talked about getting it out of the 99E through traffic.
Yeah, right. That'll be nice.
Well, that spur at one point was there planning to use that as a path to Kanema as part of the Blue Heron, or that was something that city was going to do as part of the trail system?
It is part of the plan for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. It's further out in terms of the proposed phasing, but yeah, that's the access way. One of the alternatives includes a pathway along parallel to the UP rail, using that little spur line space for a pedestrian path.
Because that would be really nice if you now have the trail from essentially all the way through to Kanema to the park up there and stuff.
Right, that would be great. Yeah. All right, so if there's no other questions on that, the other one is really related to the Cove and the closure of Main Street Extension. So
It's done. The project's done, right?
yeah, it's October 31st almost, right? We're just about there.
They're opening S3, right?
So the Cove project is not anywhere near kind of the schedule that they'd hoped to get to. For one, it took them a while to submit the final design to us, and us a while to approve it. And so they got started pretty late anyway in the summer season. So they've accomplished a lot on that site on Lot 2, which is right behind the Oregon City Shopping Center. Most of that's on structural fill of some sort. So most of it's cement treated columns, essentially, where they drill down and they place cement treated soil in a compacted fashion in these columns. And so they've been working pretty heavy on that. They've also moved a lot of what we call the North Park, which is right behind the wastewater treatment plant. All that soil, there's a big hole over there. If you've walked the trail lately, there's quite a bit of soil removal that they've been able to get accomplished and move over to the Lot 2 site and compact. But they've run into a variety of problems. And the last meeting we had with them was last Friday, and really, it's the reality of there's no way that they're going to meet the October 31st deadline. And in reality, with good weather and everything going the right way, we're probably going to see that go probably end of January, probably maybe even February or March, depending on how weather plays out for them. So they've also had most of the utility work that was laid out and designed. They didn't really do their due diligence on the potholing of the existing utilities, so none of that really married up as shown on the plan. So they're trying to go through that effort too. They did all the potholing for that, reestablish where those pipelines, the existing pipelines are, and that way they can, figure out conflicts. And so we've actually got now more approved set of plans. It's more aligned with what the reality of the existing utilities is. So all of that's meant a lot of delay, on top of the fact that it's pretty early in October and it's been pretty wet. So we're beyond the point of no return because they've removed most of the asphalt in the roadway there. And so we're just going to continue to work with them to try to stay on track with schedule and get that project finished.
I'm wondering why you guys, I mean, allowed them to start on the street that late in the game.
Mostly because they've got to build a 48-inch storm sewer pipe, which we know they can build in the wintertime. And so in order to build that, they're going to tear up most of the roadway anyway. They've also got all their storm laterals for the street design, and they got to build a water line in there. So all the utility work is essentially going to kind of tear up the roadway anyway. So yeah, we gave them a permit to move forward with all that work. Originally, their schedule showed them moving much faster. In fact, they would have been done with most of that work by now if they'd have been on time and had not had so many utility conflicts. So yeah, we're just trying not to get in the way of that and try not to micromanage their projects when in fact the detour is inconvenient, mostly for bicyclists and walkers that have to kind of go all the way out onto 99E and around through Clackamas Park to get to kind of the pathway trailhead. But you know, I think the city's motivated to see that project done. The developer's definitely motivated to see it done. So we're trying not to get in the way and still allowing the work to happen even in the wintertime. They're talking about building a lot of the road improvements even in the wintertime, so we'll see how that goes.
One more question. So is there any plans to take that Agnes and then connect it, at least for pedestrians, to the Washington Street?
We're not comfortable with Agnes. If you walked it, it's not the best path either. It's a through path. You can walk it, but it's got trip hazards and there's some gate there. So
No. Once the Agnes gets once it gets built as part of the Cove development,
yes,
it will terminate at the North Park, and then from there, you have the piece of road that would have to go through the Clackamas County.
So
property.
that plan hasn't changed. It's more, it's less of a pathway, although it would function as a pathway, and more of an emergency connection. Should floodwaters get to the height, then that would be a access point for those folks that would be in the apartment building. They'd have to go out to Washington Street by that way. So my recollect is there's like it's more than a half street, but it's a narrower street with bike lane and sidewalks on both sides, I believe, and but no on-street parking.
But at least pedestrians
Right.
will be able to move.
Yeah. That, and there'll be the waterfront path all the way along there. So there'll
I
be.
think it's still kind of missed opportunity not to have full street and connect
Yeah.
the Washington.
Yeah.
Now that's a different phase. So right now they're really only proposing the excavation on the North Park and building the garden apartments on phase one.
I know this isn't in the TAC bailiwick, but have there been any provisions to control the cost overrun charges that I can foresee coming up?
No,
My second question is,
It's not really. It's not a. It's a private development project, Bob. So there's no city money involved in that project.
oh,
Let me back out of that.
Well, there's some urban renewal
There's
money.
likely going to be no urban renewal in this first phase.
Oh, okay.
There's
I
likely
thought we were involved, like you said, with the urban renewal.
no. There will be a request for SDC credits for the. For instance, they're building this 48-inch storm line through their site. It's not a project-related need. It's a need to serve really the area on the east side of 205,
Home Depot.
the Home Depot area, the landfill site when it develops in the future. So they built I think Sedimary, you probably sized that pipe for us,
I
I think,
designed
at some
that.
point in time. So they're moving forward with building that piece, so that they're going to ask for SDC credits for that. Some of the transportation improvements will also, definitely the sidewalk and the bike lane will be SDC creditable. A portion of the roundabout will be SDC creditable. So they will ask for that. But, cost overruns, At this point, it's most of their effort's been in trying to move that dirt, which has got nothing to do with what they're going to get credit for with the transportation improvements. So,
My other question, again, not TAC related, but what happens to the hole that they're digging over there that you mentioned? Are we gonna end up with another cove?
That's the amphitheater.
yeah, the cove number 2. No, the intent, the grading plan there is such that it'll drain down to kind of a low point. The pathway that's there now is going to be much lower, right? And there will be a little pond area that we wanted for stormwater retention, essentially, and that's also where the amphitheater, and if there were ever a stage or something, would be in that area. And so it'll all slope down to essentially a staged area, but in the wintertime it could turn into a bit of a detention pond, and then it will be piped across the pathway to a deeper bowl that will be down near, it'll slope down to the ordinary high water mark. So it's about 18 feet, I think, down there at that elevation. So it will be nicely sloped, and it'll look different than it does today because there was basically a mound of dirt, and there's going to be more of a hole there, but it'll be a sloped hole.
Be a nice hole.
Well, hopefully, eventually. This phase really just grades it, and they seed it, and depending on what the weather's like, they may have to put some kind of a erosion control fabric along there. But yeah,
But that park will not come online until some other phase.
right. But the pathway will be reestablished, and should be in its final location. All right. If there's no other questions about that, in your packet, just wanted to be passing along information that the county has been sharing with us about the fuel tax. So I'm not planning to say much more than that, other than that's an initiative that we hope you study and look at, and decide how to vote for. Other than that, I don't want to get myself stuck in the wrong place of advocating or not advocating for that initiative. So I'll leave it there. And then, what's the last item? I flipped past it. That's yours, actually. The inclement weather preparation. You want to talk about that before I go on the other topics?
Yeah, so it's that time of year again where we dust off the winter preparedness plan. We actually started making preparations for it about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, right around just in time for this last weekend. So it's basically, I shared this plan with the complete plan with you guys, I think last time this year. Calls for us basically dusting everything off, hooking up all the snow plows, making sure all the chains fit, having some internal training again with all of the staff, going over the de-icing plans and all of the routes. So it's just letting you know that we're...
Generators.
Yep.
Exercising.
We actually ran all the generators today on load for... Or was that yesterday? That was yesterday. Yeah, I ran all the generators on load for a good half hour to an hour. So it's just normal preparedness.
How do you guys decide, let's say, at which point do you apply de-icer?
So there's a protocol that we follow that was actually set up through ODOT and several other counties, Marion County being one of the big contributors, as to when you apply de-icer, when you apply sand, and when you don't apply either of those two. It's written out in our winter weather plan, and the guys kind of go over that every year at the beginning of the winter season, and then before we go out and start actually applying anything. If we know the weather's going to turn, we'll review that plan all over again. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, what the exact conditions are when we don't or when we do. It's all written down in the plan. It's just something we run over again.
Now, is this also available, let's say, to a public?
Yeah, it's actually on our Public Works webpage, right,
Yep.
Lisa? Yeah.
So people could go in and say,
Yep.
okay, these are the...
Oh, we want you to, because we get as many calls, come and apply de-icer, and we have to explain to them no. And then the other big thing is, so de-icer is extremely slippery. And if you don't put it out in the right conditions, it has the possibility of actually making it worse. Sand is more of a traction system. It's not going to do anything for existing ice. And if it's a lot of rain, neither of them are going to be, any use. They're basically putting money down the storm system that can cause a bigger environmental hazard than if you had done nothing at all. So all those conditions are kind of outlined in the winter weather plan. And then the other big thing that we have in there, which we make clear to everyone, is we do not do residential roads. The only thing that we target are arterials and some of the major connector roads. But we get calls every year when we get into a weather conditions. Hey, can you come, hit my little cul-de-sac where the four of us live? And we go, no. It's just not a prudent system.
You mean you're still gonna turn me down
Yeah.
for my long, steep driveway?
Yeah. It's just not a prudent system. It's really to get people from point A to point B. The residential roads, if first of all, it's 25 miles an hour. You should be driving pretty prudently through there to begin with. For our focus, it's the connectors, the arterials. That's where we put our dollars.
What is your procedure for checking out the chains? I mean, do they?
We physically put them on every one of the trucks. So
Okay.
each of the chains is marked and labeled as this belongs to truck, 6, what was it? Pick a number.
604.
Yeah.
And who
So-
puts the chains on?
The mechanics and then the primary operator of that vehicle. So the mechanics will go and order any sort of replacements, but whoever the primary operator is, they put the chains on during dry season. So they're
And
going
then
to
what
start doing
happens
those this week.
during a storm if you have chain breakage out there in the field?
Oh, we've got spares. We've got an entire storage room of spares for most of the vehicles. So that's one of the reasons we try and normalize the fleet a few years ago. So predominantly been buying F-150s or F-series trucks. Makes it a little bit easier to keep on-hand counts.
Well, the reason I ask those questions is because
Mhm.
of the business that I was in when I was still working with the HVAC, and
Mm-hmm.
every fall I'd have a chain party with all my technicians, and I was amazed at the number of chains that were broken, or a van would have only one chain, or maybe I had a new technician that didn't even know how to put chains on.
Yeah.
And so those-
What are chains?
Yeah, right. And I had one guy who was afraid to drive in the snow. Well, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see you're well prepared for those.
Well, the question I asked, like, can you find this information? So if I'm sitting in my house and I want to figure out, okay, I need to get to work or something, which roads should I?
Yeah, the
really try
routes
to
are
get
all
to?
in the plan.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it tells you priority routes, what we'll hit first, and then what we hit secondary.
And not just in the plan, we actually have a map
Mhm.
that shows you the priority routes based on color. So you
Okay.
can see
Yeah.
where
And
we'll
then-
hit first and so on.
No, I was just
I've seen that. It's really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, and the
Don't
other,
don't use Forsyth.
yeah, the other big thing is what roads we close,
Mhm.
because there's conditions that we hit, and then we just close the entire road. So 15th Street, Pearl. There's a few others that, when the conditions just get right, we'll close the entire road, and then they basically turn into ski parks.
Martin?
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that you probably don't have the equipment and the manpower to keep anything but the main streets open?
I'd say that'd be a fair assessment, yeah. So when we go to 24-hour ops, which we've done the last 2 winters, to try and address snowfall, we have 3 guys per shift, plus a supervisor, and that'll keep basically, hopefully 3 trucks running, 2 trucks running and 1 de-icer or sander running during that time period. We just don't have the manpower or the stamina to extend that for more than a few days if we started focusing on anything other than the arterials and the connectors.
What is just ballpark kind of average cost for that operation? So
We worked that up for the last winter storm. I don't remember what it was on
I
the top
don't
of my
either.
head. I know I sent you a report as to what it
Yeah.
ran. Yeah, I can search my emails. I know when we had last winter's storm, John had asked the same question, and we said, "Oh, this is what it costs," but it's not inexpensive.
We You know, you remember the big snow and ice event?
2008.
Was it 2008?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
for like a week or
Of course,
so.
Martin wasn't here to experience that, but you know, we put our little fleet to test. We went through snowplows and trucks and transmissions, and I mean, we learned a lot from that event. And we even had our old grader out on the roads doing some things. And what we learned was we did a lot of effort, took on a lot of liability for the city, and at the end of the day, we had just as many folks upset with us because we'd gone ahead and plowed some residential neighborhoods, and we'd created these berms of snow that then people couldn't get out of their driveways because of that. And so, you know, I guess if that were a repeat, we'd probably have to reevaluate. I wouldn't say we won't do, for instance, Oak Tree Terrace is one that, you know, is really kind of problematic, but we definitely don't want to be putting vehicles on those kind of roads, big trucks with sand on them, for instance, if they're going to slide. So looking a lot harder at liability. I learned a lot from that event, and some of that has changed how we do business, because it really just wasn't it was a good response. I thought we did a great job of keeping, you know, compared to others in our region, our neighbors, and I thought we did a really good job. But since then, we've taken a closer look at, you know, whether that's really the right thing to do, or do we just wait a couple more days and let things thaw on their own. So I think we've got a great little plan, and we do have some pretty solid capabilities. A lot of local agencies come and ask us about our de-icer program, and have looked at it's mostly pickup truck mounted, you know, equipment that's got a container on it with a pump and a distribution bar, and that de-icers can be, you know, pretty effective. Not obviously actually it was effective in the big ice storm, because a lot of that ice broke up quicker than what it did in other agencies. But yeah, I think it's a really good program. But depending on that storm event, we probably spent $80,000 over that winter just trying to respond to that. So, any other questions? Martin's going to try and find a number for you. But any other questions before I jump into some other updates? Okay. I don't recall if you folks have met Dana Webb, but she's one of our project engineers. She's overseeing what we're calling our alternative mobility study for Beaver Creek and 213. So it's really kind of a study of the 213 corridor near that intersection. And that intersection has capacity problems, and we're never going to build our way out of that particular problem. So the state has asked the city to put together a scope and go through the process of what they call alternate mobility study. And that's just kicking off. We've hired Kittleson and Associates to do that study for us, and there's a lot of public involvement. At the end of the day, we're probably going to come up with some recommendations for improvements that could happen at that intersection that might either make it safer, add a little bit more capacity, but I think the majority of that's going to be how to inform the public when things are backed up. It's also going to be about adoption of standards that would allow for more congestion over a longer period of time, essentially lower the bar with regard to how much congestion is acceptable. And so
How much is acceptable?
well, that's what the study will figure out, right? How much can you handle? How much is likely to happen out there, and how much of that can you handle? And is it something that that would be adopted by the state as an acceptable standard?
Would looking at a second connection to 213 from from Maple Lane, by where the old bus barn is, would that be part of the possibility?
I don't think so, because we've hammered that pretty hard with ODOT, and you know, given that the 213 corridor is a
well loaded,
it's
well used.
basically it's an express route, if you will. So they're not too keen on having multiple interchanges on an express route. So I asked Dana about an update for this, and she basically said that the community, they're planning to form a community advisory group. And there's lots of folks in there, folks from the Planning Commission, City Commission, Citizen Involvement Committee, Transportation Advisory Committee. There'll be resident property owners from Maple Lane, Thayer Road area, Forest Edge area, and citywide. Advocates for accessibility, transit, and cycling. Business property owner representative, community development department, stakeholder group. Well, I'm not sure what that means, but we have the community development department has a stakeholder group that they invite for monthly meetings, and so probably be somebody from that meeting. Chamber of Commerce, Business Alliance, Community College, Beaver Creek Employment Area Steering Committee, and probably the Hamlet of Beaver Creek. So I committed to bringing this to you today and see the first meetings looking like it's going to happen in on December 15th, if I recall correctly. These will be evening meetings. There will be 3 meetings, probably a couple hours each. And the last meeting will be a joint meeting between the community advisory group and the technical advisory group. So I think it'll be interesting because it'll be unique. Not other agencies have done alternate mobility studies, but not their situations quite different. So, for instance, the city of Sandy's done an alternate mobility standard, but they've done it for Highway 26, and it's more seasonal. Same with some Coast Range stuff, and they have also had alternatives that would allow them to expand at some point in the future when they hit a particular capacity range. We don't really have many options for expansion there, short of what was originally planned was more of a Cloverleaf flyover, and it's been made clear to us by the state that there's too many other priorities to justify spending that kind of money at that location. So,
So what level of service it operates today?
it's there's times during the year and during the day, mostly when school is in session and during peak hour, which in this case is around 5 o'clock, where we have seen that intersection fail.
So what do you go from fail to?
Well, failures.
You go to fail more.
There's a specific criteria of the time in which you fail, and so it'll probably be, is that failure, at what level is that failure, and over what period of time? Do you allow that failure to happen over a 2-hour period or a 3-hour period? Those are the kind of questions that will come up in that analysis. So,
So you guys are essentially trying to get away from making improvements by modifying standard or what's acceptable.
yeah, that and making sure the intersection's safe. That's the main thing. There may be more delay there, but as long as it's safe delay, that's kind of the
And
standard.
it's regulated by lights. Should be safe.
Yeah, and I think, the interesting thing I find is I drive through that intersection all the time at that time, and then you go drive over in Beaverton or in other places, Powell and some of the interchanges at 205 and Powell and Division in that area.
At almost any time.
Yeah, so I'm not, we're dealing with a problem that exists sometimes today, but not very often today. But as the Beaver Creek Road area builds out, we're going to see more and more congestion in that area. So how do you deal with that?
So this alternative mobility standard is also looking the future growth
Oh, yes. Yeah,
and how that's going to be degraded over time
right,
if no improvements are made.
right. So there'll likely be a capital plan that'll come out of this that'll suggest, here's the, I think there's going to be things like right turn lanes or maybe prohibiting left turns at certain locations. Those kind of things that might
Is
make
there a
the
way to
intersection.
do something what was done down on, I guess, at the Washington or not? I mean, right at
You mean the
that-
jug handle project?
jug handle.
Yeah, well, that was a $23 million project, so I think that's what we're hearing is ODOT is not willing to expend any of their federal allocation for that location. So we need a representative member. That's the main point. We're talking about lots of the important stuff that will be discussed. Sounds like Sedmer's pretty interested. I don't know if he wants to allocate any more time, but trying to find someone that would like to fill that role. If we had lots of access, we need an advocate for cycling. So that may be an opportunity there, but I need at least one that would represent the Transportation Advisory Committee. And if there was somebody that wanted to represent, say, the cycling, then there's a application form that's draft right now. They're going to have it put together, and actually that, because it may become a little competitive. I don't really know.
I would volunteer to do it. I got the time and a little bit of background, and if necessary, I could do the cycling one, but I'd much prefer that a cycling advocate do it.
Okay. I have no preference. Okay. Well, I can go with that, and we can think about cycling if,
Yeah.
Thomas, if you want to think about that.
Yeah, I don't want to overcommit with other
Yeah.
irons like that in the fire coming up. So
Okay.
He may be on it anyway.
And we
from
may
another
have
spot.
one of the absent members showing interest in that too. Now, where are we with the extension of the left turn lane on Beaver Creek Road?
So
North to northbound 213.
So let's see. I think last time I reported, we got one really high bid of the first round of bid solicitation, and so we passed on that, and we got no bids the second round. We were pretty late season, so we're either gonna we're definitely gonna bid it earlier, and maybe by itself. The engineer has suggested if we have a project with like work in it, we might suggest trying to insert, a couple of projects together to maybe make that look a little more appealing. There's really not a lot of work there. It's mostly just managing traffic and doing it. I think we were going to allow them to work any hours, but like 7 to, I can't remember the hours. Maybe it was basically during the day. We weren't going to allow them to work and allow them to work at night. So that was the last change, and we still didn't have a lot of interest in it.
Have you run the work hours through the Bureau of Labor to see what their standards are?
Well, I mean, you can work anytime you need to. It's just, whatever your employer, and if it's, if it's overtime, then you got to pay an overtime rate. So
I ran into this problem on a project or two where Bureau of Labor had an input into it on their rules on when work was supposed to happen and pay versus pay.
well, they'd have to follow the prevailing wage rates.
Right.
That's a requirement of all of our contracts. But as far as I know, they don't prohibit you from working. The BOLI doesn't. ODOT does.
No.
ODOT prohibits us from being out in the right of way at certain hours.
Yeah.
I
If
know
they were,
that
like, holidays,
that
sometimes,
particular left turn lane will not just block up 2 lanes, but 3 lanes in reality.
Say that again now.
That the 2 left turn lanes, if they're totally blocked, then it turns into 3 lanes being totally blocked because it blocks the one
Yeah.
through lane.
Yeah.
So that would be a big help, I think, in that particular spot.
Yeah, we agree. It's just got to get decent bids.
Yeah, right.
The other thing I wanted to report was we talked a little bit about neighborhood traffic management plans. Trying to remember who, if it was Gary or Bob. Oh, okay, Bob. Somebody brought this up about neighborhood traffic management plans, and I floated an email out to our technical advisory committee group through Clackamas County, and I got really 3 responses. One from the city of Sandy, one from the city of Lake Oswego, and one from the state who referred me to Portland's website. which doesn't really have, that I found, a neighborhood traffic management program. But I got a couple of them. They seem very similar to what we're doing in this room already. Although Lake Oswego looked at a particular neighborhood, which is their, I forget the name of the neighborhood. It's right in their downtown area around A Avenue, so the old town. And they put a lot of energy into defining what kind of traffic management devices might be allowed, like circles at intersections. Instead of a roundabout, they just plug a little circle in the middle of the intersection and landscape that up, and vehicles would kind of have to meander around that, and curb extensions, those kind of things, speed humps, some of which we have in our disposal already. So just got them, didn't study them, not really sure what to do with it. It's definitely not in our work plan at this point in time. We could make it a goal as a future goal for this group to start looking at those and figuring out if there's something missing that we're not considering, or if we want to take on a particular area of town. But just wanted you to know, give you that little update. Okay. You already mentioned the 2 turn lanes. Also, just letting you know, we're trying to get appraisals for the corner at 99E and Railroad Avenue. We've got to acquire some property there to soften that turn as you come down 99E and turn onto Railroad Avenue, to make that turn a little more conducive, so that there's a little more pedestrian safety there. Because right now you come around that corner pretty fast and people come out of that pedestrian tunnel, and there's potential there. And ODOT is pushing us pretty hard to, especially once the Willamette Falls Legacy Project develops, they want to see more traffic using Railroad Avenue coming around on 6th and going in on Main. So that's a project that we're under a timeline to get done. So we're working with appraisers to get right away there, so we can basically lengthen the curve as you come onto Railroad Avenue. And then we've got KPFF and DKS under contract to do, well, DKS is a subcontract to finish the, to provide us with 90% design plans for the 12th and Washington signalized, 12th and Washington intersection, which will include completion of the signal. There's quite a bit of that signal that was installed several years ago, so this would finish that up. And we just got to figure out how to pay for it. So they're going to do 90% plans, give us a detailed cost estimate, and from there we'll figure out how to fund it. It's definitely not in this year's budget, but it could be in next year's budget. We're working on obtaining right-of-way for Myers Road, so surveyors have been out there to actually stake the alignment for Myers Road. This is from where the high school's transportation facility built their little stub of Myers Road, and it'll take it to 213. So we're working on that, and probably in the not too distant future, we'd like to secure the right of way before we jump into much more design, but we're gonna move into that. Anything else?
What about when are you guys planning to repair that slide on Holcomb, right there on that curve?
So
That would affect traffic for a little bit, right?
go ahead.
That slide that occurred on private property. We submitted that within our package to FEMA to try and see if we can get it included for repairs with all of the work that we did last summer. We've just closed out all the projects that were approved, and the Holcomb Road project was denied by the federal government. So we, the city, are going to try and work with the private property owner and see if there's some sort of repair that we can come to. But again, the majority of that slide is all outside of the right of way.
But would it affect potentially a road if nothing gets done?
It could, yeah. So we're going to try and work with them. But again, I can't expend public dollars on private property without some sort of agreement in place stating, why we're taking the money.
That particular spot has probably had 3 slides in the last 5 years.
Yep.
Just the nature of the animal.
Part of the problem is the way that knoll, it's kind of a knoll between 213 and the way Holcomb rounds that, and there's a lot of impervious area up on top there in the private developments, and it's actually the one that's not fronting the slide area, but all that runoff comes down through there and saturates the yard that failed. I mean, it was a raging river when we were out there looking at it, and it just washes over that edge. And so somehow we've got to figure out how to mitigate that as well, or at least make sure our design has provision for picking up that rainwater before it just kind of further saturates the slope. But I think the slide repair is, you know, it's not that complicated, but you know, we didn't want to rush into it. We were hoping for dollars to be able to pay for the design, and then it's just been the busyness of summer season, and so we're planning to take that on. It's just a matter of when, and we think it's stable at this point. So I'm hoping you got this information, but you can hand that out for me, Lisa. So we have, you probably remember this project, some of you. We pursued grant funding for Malala Avenue between Beaver Creek and 213 3 years ago. We pursued it, we pursued what's called the Metro's Regional Flexible Fund Allocation Grant. And it comes up every 3 years. This year there's about $25 million available for the entire metro region. And we went ahead and tuned up the Malala Avenue grant project. It's basically going to improve the roadway, replace existing but outdated signals at Gaffney and Claremont, add safer crosswalk locations, probably some medians where it makes sense. Definitely clean up a lot of the, if you notice along there, there's a lot of wide driveways that people just kind of come flying off of Malala into a parking area. And so clean that up, street lighting. We wouldn't touch those areas that have already been redeveloped and have street lighting and have sidewalks, but those gap areas would be fixed. And then of course the roadway and all the striping associated with bike lanes and crosswalks and turn pockets, all that stuff would be redone. So because this is a competitive process, one, we're feeling pretty fortunate about the fact that we've scored out of 27 projects, we are number 6. We've been number 6. 6 seems to be the sweet spot. We're not quite at the top. We're definitely not at the bottom, but there's still some uncertainty about whether we'll get the grant. And so the grant process involves, first of all, the grant application, which we ranked very well on. So we did, we feel like we did a good job with that piece of it. There's some due diligence that goes into our project estimate that, again, that's more of a technical review from the state and Metro. They look at that and evaluate, you know, where our estimates, they actually provided a calculator, so I'm pretty sure that our estimates are going to be fine. Metro has now created a calculator that they like us to use, so it's more about our quantities, those kind of things. So
Cost estimating?
yeah, and this is a federally funded grant, so the cost estimates have some pretty high contingencies in them. We think it's an $8 million project, and that's a pretty scaled back project actually. It's a pretty long project, but it's not a complete redo like we've done on 7th and the other segment of Malala down near Pearl Street in that area. This would be similar but not as comprehensive. But we did so such that we could do a good job of trying to ask for a reasonable amount of money. We think it's an $8 million project, and we're asking for just under $4 million. So it's a little bit more than 50% match for the city, which is a big match, and we think that helped our project. So we've got to go through this short technical review, which we know we're going to do well on. Now there's a public involvement phase, and that consists of Metro's online survey. So I want to make sure everybody on our TAC fills out the survey at a minimum. We need you to do that. So if you can get online, it's real easy to do. I did it in about 2 minutes myself, so I've even submitted comments, which
Is there, this is the link on the bottom?
Vote
Yeah.
early and vote often.
there's a link to our website, which has a link to the Metro's.
Oh, okay.
The other thing is we're planning to last time we scored really well and still didn't get the project. It got a little politically sideways on us. Some of you might remember that. It's got the potential to do that again. We're competing with some really good projects. Let's just say that in not only in the region but definitely in our own county. So I think there's going to be
County?
in our own county, right? So
Where are these?
West Lynn submitted 2 projects actually, but one of them's really competitive, although they didn't score very well in the rankings, because this is about this funding is about alternate forms of transportation, so biking, pedestrian improvements, and West Lynn project, has that in it, but it also has criteria that talk about places with maybe low income or families with need. So they rank that, and we ranked really high with that because we've got a lot of low income, especially along that corridor, a lot of senior living along that corridor. So not so true for West Lynn, so it didn't score as well. But whether the Clackamas County and the folks who sit on our Clackamas County C4, Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, they're going to be the ones who make the decision on what the county as a whole will recommend to Metro. And that's where we get sideways, usually. So we're putting forth a pretty decent effort. There's a kind of a town hall meeting at the next C4 meeting, which is November 3rd. And we're working on a handful of folks that we'd like to speak and represent on behalf. To me, it makes sense to have somebody from TAC in that group as well. So again, looking for volunteers, somebody that'd be interested in, first of all, getting familiar with the project, and being able to come to that public hearing and speak with passion on behalf of our project, representing groups like senior living, community college, school district, business community, especially business in that corridor, and the neighborhood. So we've reached out to Amy Wellhite and Amber with the chamber. So I think anybody can come, and some cities may bring the masses. I'm kind of hoping we can bring half dozen folks that represent large groups that can do a good job speaking on behalf of the project.
Hopefully the president of the Gaffney neighborhood group can show up. She's a pretty good advocate.
It's Amy Wellhite.
Yeah, that's Amy. Unfortunately, she's got surgery that day. So, but she's already suggested another good participant that could speak on behalf. So, if anybody on the TAC wants to, you don't have to tell me tonight, but I need to know in a couple days, because we'll probably start putting together actual speaker notes for you, so that we can have the different groups. We'd like a bike. I think we've reached out to Blaine. I left him a message to see if he could help us out with that as well, to speak on behalf of the kind of the bike community. So,
Well, since there's a couple of senior citizen facilities right there, I would be interested in being involved.
you want to be our senior rep? Okay.
Whatever you want to call it. But now, you said that the county makes the decision? Would that be the county commission?
So it's kind of interesting. Other counties don't have this kind of as much of this conflict. Somehow they get it figured out in their coordinating committees ahead of time. Senator Mayor, I don't know if you've ever been part of that, but they don't have the problems that we have in Clackamas County in terms of being able to help. I think part of that's got to do with the fact that the county does a lot of things that are very much like they're a city. And so they represent a lot of citizens as an urban service provider. And so they puts us in, instead of them being in a advisory help mode, it puts them more in a competitive mode.
They're more of an adversary than a friend.
Sometimes, not all the time, but
Yeah.
sometimes. So, you know, they'd like to get this money just as much as we would. And they've submitted on a project that's in unincorporated Clackamas County. It's called Monroe Street. And I think they have a couple of projects actually.
So basically, the county is going to decide how many projects within the Clackamas County they advise or recommend Metro to accept this.
Yes.
So, but the county also has a project that they're trying to lobby for. So how does that work? I mean, who is on the committee?
That's why
So-
Sunrise Corridor never dies.
So so there's a couple of there's a lot of interest in this, by the way. So the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee is made up of just about, I think, every city, even that little city,
Johnson
City.
Yep.
Even they have a seat at the table, and every city has one vote. They've also invited a representative from wastewater districts, water districts, hamlets. There's a lot of folks in the room that sit on C4, okay, as well as there's one county commissioner that sits on C4, and and they're all electeds. Most of them are electeds, except for those that all the city folks are electeds. They're either commissioners, councilors, or mayors, and it's a big group, and that's the group that actually has the bylaws for this C4 committee, and they're the ones slated to make a recommendation to the county commissioners, and then the county commissioners will make the recommendation to Metro, right? And so within the C4, there's also a subcommittee that's made up of just the metro area cities and the county, of course, because they're in the metro area. That portion of them is in the metro area. And there's some debate right now as to why the larger group, the C4 group, should have a right to vote on dollars that don't necessarily affect their area or jurisdiction or whatever that is. These dollars are metro dollars, so they're specific to cities and areas within the metro region. And so there's some heated debate about whether or not that recommendation should come from the Metro C4 subcommittee or whether it should come from the C4 in total. And we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of meetings here. But I think it's going to be discussed at the Metro level of the Metro cities, and they'll make a recommendation. But the C4 has been not interested in relenting any of that decision-making authority. So we'll see.
How much weight does the, what do you call it, the copay or the amount?
Oh, the match?
The match, yeah. How much weight does that carry? Because that seems
Not
like
enough.
that 50% is higher than normal.
Not enough, in my opinion, although a lot of the top projects have significant matches.
Oh.
So it used to be the minimum requirement was 10.27%. There's out of the 20, I can't remember how many projects I have here, 25 projects or so. There's, really just I see 3 or 4 that suggested that kind of match. Everybody else is much higher. Not many over 50 though, and there's a handful at 50. So ours is at 50.1%, and we think that should matter more because some of these jurisdictions, we're matching this with pavement maintenance funding, with transportation system SDCs, and gas taxes, right? That's really kind of all we have to match with. And so we've got high transportation SDCs, and we've got a high pavement maintenance utility fee. So to me, that means we as citizens of the city have a higher buy-in to these projects, and we're paying the bill. It's not coming from some other form that doesn't necessarily hit you in the pocket like it does in Oregon City.
How much use, I mean, do we get out of this?
How much use?
In this corridor, like pedestrians and bikes?
Well, I don't have specific numbers, but they're high. I mean, it's our transit's a good measure of that. I mean, it's one of the leading lift pickup stops along, in the region. So it's got high usage along that corridor.
And if you look at the corridor, it's got a lot of destinations.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it, one side's kind of commercial, the other side's all residential. So it's not really a safe corridor to cross. So people tend not to walk.
We had people come and lobby for crosswalks and stuff right there before.
Right? Yeah. I mean, you're right. That's Amy came and talked a fair amount about wanting some better crosswalk there, and this project includes that crosswalk.
But if you look at this, all of our grocery stores are there. The community college is at one end of it, and so
it's a way to a county too.
And it's heavily used by the county.
Our post office,
offices,
the
right?
post office is there.
Yeah.
We have several beverage distribution companies and other companies that go in and out of there all the time, of that nature. So it's got a lot of traffic, and if you could figure out a way to increase alternative, that is to say, make it easier to get across the street and walk in and bike there, then it would, in the long run, help everybody.
Preaching to the choir.
I know.
But I guess the point is, how do we convince whoever needs to get convincing that this is worthwhile project and that we should get those funds?
Yeah, and we think the right way to do it is to send out this kind of information, fill out the survey, and then have a core group of informed and prepared speakers speak at that public hearing. And then maybe there's some politics involved too, and we've talked to the mayor and Commissioner Mengelberg about some of that as well. So I don't know what else we can do.
November 3rd.
November 3rd. Yeah.
What
Well,
time?
it seems like,
At the County Development Services Building.
What time?
Those meetings start at 6:45
Evening?
in the evening.
That's up at the top of the hill where the farmers market is.
No,
it's
close. It's the newest of the two buildings, so it's on that other library court.
Okay.
So were you
Seems
planning
like a
to
50%.
buy more right away for this project?
There's a little bit of right-of-way acquisition. Yes.
You got room to move the poles out of the middle of the sidewalk?
We don't, so our intent would be to maintain the curb alignment that's there now for most locations, and build more sidewalk. Leave those. You're talking about the power poles, right? Yeah, there's power poles that run all the way along there.
Have you guys reached out to the PGE and
We
to
will-
get support from them?
We
for a project?
will. We have talked about, if we get the grant, working with PGE to maybe underground a lot of that. I don't know if we can underground all of it. It's a lot of, there's pretty high transmission power along there. But that's a concept, as well as working with some of those property owners like Fred Meyer, who need, they've got to develop a lot right along there, and they're talking to us right now. So is there a way to get more funding out of those folks as well that would help build a more complete project, which might include undergrounding? But if we don't underground, then our alternate would be to, build more sidewalk on the backside of those and keep those streetlights more in the furnishing zone, if you will.
I guess depending on to your franchise agreements, but I know I'm doing a project right now for City of Beaverton where the cities and urban renewal, they're going to essentially pay for conduits and vaults and provide those, and then PG and other utilities will just come and put their equipment and pull the wires, and that cuts their cost down, and they're much more acceptable. And when if we do a lot of directional boring, it can be a fairly inexpensive way to underground, so something to look into.
Yeah, we'll definitely, if we can get this grant, we'll be looking at all those alternatives.
I was thinking, like, if you can mount their support and have them there too, to say, hey, this is, we're willing to work with that.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I haven't thought of that. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, we've come to communications. Does anybody have anything they want to speak about?
Was anyone gonna discuss the crosswalk site evaluation guidelines that are in the agenda packet?
No, we just provided those as informational items.
Were you planning to adopt them, or just there for information?
We haven't really talked about it. They came in. Henry, did you send those? Or?
Yeah, that's something that I found online and just thought they might be of interest to this group to see at least how one jurisdiction is deciding whether an area should have a marked or unmarked crosswalk.
I haven't even really talked to Martin about it, and his group does most of the, determination of whether or not we're gonna. I mean, for the most part, those crosswalks. So I thought it was good information, and I liked having a diagram like that.
Yeah,
I don't think it's much different than what we do, but sometimes we don't have those policies written, so maybe we may pursue that, but we haven't really talked about it. We just want to get it in the packet.
I brought up those offset crosswalks that Portland has in certain areas. Were we ever able to get the time to research the feasibility of those? Or?
Yeah, well, interesting. One of the other things that I attended at the APWA conference was pedestrian safety on roundabouts. So there were several examples where they would place one leg or one, the crosswalk across one of the directions of that in one location, and then get to kind of a right angle and walk one way or the other, and then find a better location for the next crosswalk.
Yeah.
It was helpful for sight impaired folks, and there was good advantages to some of that. And I also think that there's potential for some of that on Malala Avenue if we can do some of that. So
yeah, because it looked like there's some out on Division Street in Portland, and that's how I learned about them. And it looks like it'd be much safer because it forces the pedestrian to face the traffic that he has to cross in front of. And some of these pedestrians, they just go right like that. Well, if they got to turn and they face the oncoming traffic because of the way it's laid out, seems like it'd be a lot safer. But again, they would be more expensive than a normal crosswalk too.
mm-hmm.
And only be able to be put in a left turn middle section highway.
yeah, I'm hoping after seeing that, when we get to the roundabout at Lynn Leland, they're near the
Mount
Central
Pleasant.
Point Road, Mount Pleasant, that roundabout.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good innovation with pedestrian safety, and that was one that I really liked.
Okay, last chance. Anybody got anything else?
A question, the Dutch Bros coffee
The
shop.
brothel?
Have you guys seen any improvements? Or I know that they were trying to make some changes, but
We're still getting complaints. They do try to move traffic through there pretty quick, and when they get too busy, they get baristas out there on the, in their driveway to move them. But we still have that left turn from traffic that's heading up the hill, wanting to pull in there, and So no, I wouldn't. You know, I think it got better, but it's still got times when people get pretty frustrated with it.
Have you heard anything about the one up on the hill? I've noticed that traffic is starting to make a right stop in Moala and try to make a right turn into it, and the island that's out there, plus the baristas out there talking, you know, kind of makes it difficult to get around them when they do that. So I have seen them out there trying to get in off of Moala that way.
Yeah, I've seen them kind of queued up in the bike lane waiting
Right.
to make that turn in.
Yeah.
You mean so? There's two different movements. One's coming down the hill trying to make the turn in, and I've seen those backed up. But
Yeah.
coming up the hill,
I haven't seen any coming up the hill because
Okay.
it's kind of difficult to deal with it, but it's all been down the hill and over and with the car parked next to the curb trying to make that right turn and the barista out there trying to take the order. That barista is not really watching the traffic coming down the hill.
yeah. I haven't noticed much of that. I don't know if you have.
I've noticed it, but I haven't seen any safety-related issues. It does back up, but they side up into the bike lane, and then most of the traffic is still able to kind of get around.
Yeah, but if
Median
they're sitting in the
roads.
bike lane, that creates, I guess, safety issue for
For the bike.
bike coming downhill.
I mean, the theory at that one was there's ability to serve was pretty fast.
Yeah.
And so if we're seeing backups like that, I don't know what the deal is. I've not seen much of that. But,
Yeah.
It's like, I live fairly close to there, and I have not seen as many backups there as what I see
Down
at the
below.
downtown one, which is right by where I work. So I get hit with both of them.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something. The illuminated speed sign on Oak Tree Terrace. It's a trailer with the illuminated. Does that belong to the police department or Public Works?
On Oak Tree Terrace?
Yeah.
There's one of each.
It's a trailer mounted.
Is it a trailer or permanent?
Trailer.
Well, it depends on what it looks like. If it looks like it's all armored up, it's the police department.
No. It's just a small little trailer.
That's ours.
It's ours. It was
That's-
placed there on the first.
Yeah.
That's in a no parking zone.
Okay.
Just so you know. I'm not gonna turn you in, but it is. And you can't see the no parking sign because it's obliterated by the neighbor's hedge there. So you might think about sending somebody out to clean that up. The hedge part, I mean. Because all you can see is the post of the sign. And the reason I know that because it's right across the street from me.
That's almost like the.
So that was requested by Commissioner Nancy Ide. So
I know
I'll
it
call
was.
her and tell her that you're trying to take her speed sign down. Take care of that right away.
Well, you know, it's a great idea. It's probably a good location, except for that storage box is there. And I think people are already slowing down because that storage box is there. So it may be some time before you get any really results out of that one. 'Cause I usually approach it at 22 miles an hour.
And you know that because it tells you that, right?
It tells me that now, yeah, but I gotta turn in my driveway right there too. So. Yeah, anything else for the? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.